Hello, I am Ryan Eller. This is my presentation for my expositional research paper over the book of James, chapter 4, verses 7 through 10. I would like to start by saying that I pray that I've done the proper hermeneutics on this passage, and that what I say in this video is accurate and portrays what the Lord would have us understand from the text. I'm reading from the English Standard Version translation, and the passage reads like this. James 4, 7 through 10. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, he will flee from you. Draw near to God, he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, he will exalt you. Now, to understand what the passage means, we first need to understand the context of the passage by introducing the who, what, why, and when of the letter. The author of the letter is James, the half-brother of Jesus. He was the head of the church in Jerusalem at this time, which would have been between the years 45 and 48 AD. He was writing this letter to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, which is in James 1, verse 1. You might be wondering what and who that is. The tribes in the dispersion refers to the Jewish Christians from Jerusalem who fled Jerusalem to all sorts of other nations after the stoning of Stephen recorded in the book of Acts. The question of why he wrote to these people remains. James wrote to these Christians because he understood what they were going through. They had fled their homeland and were living in poverty and being employed by rich landowners who were exploiting them. The truth that is revealed in the passage to these people is that if you submit to God, he will lift you up. The first part of the passage is about submitting yourselves to God. What does this mean? How do we do that? In this chapter of the book of James, we see that there is infighting among these Christians, and that they are struggling with the sin of pride. James writes in verse 7, Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. The important thing to recognize from this verse is that he gives us two commands. First, to submit to God and resist the devil, which will cause the devil to flee from us. The first command is a precondition for the second command. We know that resisting the devil doesn't make him automatically flee from us. We resist sin, but it doesn't stop the sin from being tempting to us in our everyday lives. That is why the precondition is to submit ourselves to God. With God as our authority, with us literally aligned under him, as the Greek for submit means in the original language, then we will be able to truly resist the devil, causing him to flee from us. Verse 8 reads, Draw near to God, he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. This verse is another set of commands. The first command, draw near to God, can only be done after we have submitted to him. Why are we far from God in the first place? The distance between us and God is the fault of ourselves, and it is because we are sinful. Therefore, we must submit to the Lord and make the move towards him. He has already moved towards us and will move towards us after we move towards Him. James uses language for the words draw near. That was made in the Greek to make the audience think of priest approaching God in the temple for worship and sacrifice. This type of language is continued into the next part, which is meant to allude to ceremonial cleansing and purifying of the heart and body. This is cleansing needed because we are sinners and are double-minded, which means we are trying to have both a relationship with the world and with God. And that kind of relationship is just not possible. Verse 9 reads, "Be wretched, and mourn, and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to gloom." The commands in this verse are to illustrate how sin is to make us feel. The Greek for be wretched is taliporeo. The word literally means to convey something miserable and painful. The word penthos is the Greek word for mourn, and it means to lament or to cry. Then we have the word for laughter, which is galos, and it means loud laughter. This is often seen as contrasting with the weeping that James speaks of. It is repentant of the sin that we should not take any joy at all in, the sin that has been in our lives. Jesus even taught on this in Luke 6:25. "Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep." This is not to be a casual turning away from sin, but we should feel the full conviction of our sin and turn away from it completely. The last verse, verse 10 says, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will exalt you." James begins again with a command to humble ourselves before the Lord, which is to be read as repenting and being humble in His presence. And this will lead us to being lifted up by the Lord. This passage is about true repentance and becoming humble before the Lord, so that we might be in a closer relationship with Him. Submit to God and He will lift you up. Now that we know all this, we can read the full passage in light of this information. "Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, double-minded. Be wretched, and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will exalt you." This passage is often seen as the passage of repentance and becoming humble. These Christians were dealing with all sorts of problems. They're Christians just like us. Christians that deal with the sin of pride, with the sin of arguing among your other Christians. And this passage means just as much to us today as it did to them. We are Christians in other nations. We have been persecuted in the past and currently. We fight with each other and we have pride. We are still to be repentant before the Lord, humbling ourselves every day, every moment. drawing near to Him and away from our sin, cleansing ourselves. First, we must recognize this, and then we must submit to God so that He will lift us up. Thank you.